All right, magic makers. I don't usually like to date my podcast, but I have to date it this one because it's perfect timing. It's serendipity because this podcast is coming out at the end of the year. And typically at the end of the year, that's when we start thinking, what am I going to do in the next year? What's my resolution? How am I going to be better? How am I going to be the best ever possible? And one of the things that I feel most people put on their New Year's resolution, besides lose the last 5 pounds, is some form of organization, some form of decluttering. And today I have Miss Brittany Bowman on, and that's her jam. Like that is what she does. And I feel like this is a great, episode to end the year on. And maybe if you're listening to it 6 months from now, I don't know, that many of us all can look around a room and be like, yeah, there's some stuff I can get rid of. So, Brittany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I brought you on is because there's this saying, and I'm sure you've heard the saying, and you either have like either a visceral like yes or a visceral no to this saying, and it's a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind.
Yeah.
And so many people will point to Einstein and be like, dude, Einstein had a cluttered desk, and a lot of his stuff is still relative today. So, is that bullshit, or is that there's some truth in that saying?
There is some truth to it, but what I really like to talk about with people is that it's all kind of a spectrum
Mm,
because when we talk about clutter, it's very subjective because your
mm,
level of tolerance for clutter may be totally different than mine. So what I enjoy telling people is that when it becomes when it creates anxiety for you, when it
mm.
becomes uncomfortable for you, or you're feeling like you can't focus, or you walk in a room and you immediately have like a negative feeling wash over you, it's your sign, right? That's your sign that
Right.
the balance is off for you.
It's funny that you said tolerance, and I feel that for many people who are, I'll be very honest, I have a cluttered desk. It is who I am. I've had a cluttered desk my entire life, and I think it's really funny you talk about tolerance because my husband will walk in and he'll be like, "Oh damn," and I walk in and I'm just like, "There's like I have to have an area to work, but everything on the sides I'm okay with." And so it's really funny that you talk about what your kind of tolerance levels are. And I feel that for people listening who are, like me, that like clutter is my thing. Like I get it. But you also sort of feel like, should I be more concerned that this is cluttered? And I feel like it's less about you and more about what other people either will say or judge or what have you.
Yeah, well, and it's such societal conditioning too, right? Like
Yeah.
if I open my front door to welcome a guest, they get to see my house in its natural state. And that was
Right.
something that was very hard for me a long time ago, right? Like I was just embarrassed and things like that. And I really didn't need to be, but I did have to find that window of tolerance for myself. Okay, what supports my lifestyle? What feels good to me? How does my home create peace in my life? And I'm able to open that front door with no shame. And so finding that sweet spot was really empowering for me.
So let's take a step back. So wait, so you weren't born into being this person who like, your spices were organized by either color or alphabet. You kind of grew into this organizational person.
Yeah, so I think I've always kind of been like naturally an organizer. I used to love to clean my friends' rooms when I was a kid, which they thought that that was super bizarre. And I was
Right.
like, this is fun. Like, why don't you want to participate? But so I enjoy doing that. But my parents have ADHD, and people with ADHD, we just our brain is chaotic all the time. So we remember, yeah, like our brain is chaotic and we have doom piles that just sit around and collect. And so that's just how we're naturally wired. So I kind of had to marry the two, right? My natural organizer and then also finding that sweet spot for my brain because I want to exist how I am. I don't want to constantly be telling myself I'm wrong because I have
Mm.
clutter here or there. So it's like yeah. So without rambling there, I just felt I haven't always been the level of organized that I am today, but I really have always had a tendency to make sense of a mess, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. No, no, no. I laugh about I have a friend Paula who like you like if you invite her over to your house, you know she's gonna organize something. And you're just kind of like when you do, you're like, you gotta be braced for impact. Like you just have to be braced for like
Yes.
she'll look at your closet and while you're visiting, she'll be like pulling everything out and like reorganizing it. And then you're like, oh, never thought of it like that way. But oh thanks. Right. But I could see as, for some people, they're just like, that could be annoying.
Yeah, I love that.
Um,
Oh.
but yeah, it's funny that you say that because I just had a woman on talking about ADHD and the clutter, and it's like we have clutter blindness. Like we're just like, oh, there's a pile over there. Like meanwhile, you just stepped over it, and you don't even realize that you stepped over it because you've been stepping over it for maybe years.
Absolutely. Mm.
And so when you say tolerance, so I think for many people the problem is we try to build ourselves into norms. You mentioned, okay, if I have people over, what am I going to be judged on? Are they going to see piles of laundry on my couch and then be like, girlfriend can't fold her laundry? Or are you going to be like, before people come over, I have to fold my laundry? Are those the kind of like, do I have to conform to society or do I just be like, no one comes in my house?
So I feel like for me, the progression was like, okay, this house is stressing me out. And
Mm,
I had the added issue of not wanting anyone to see it. So for me, it was like just finding that the level that made you feel good. And it
mm,
actually, once I felt good, it really changed my mindset. It was like I feel good. This place is bringing me joy, and I still have a doom pile here or there. My junk drawer is a doom pile, and which for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, it's a didn't organize, only moved. So when you like shove a bunch of stuff in a bag and you're like, I'll deal with it later, and you never do. Yes. Yeah, and that is so typical in the neurodivergent community too. But we all have a tendency to do that also. But I got sidetracked there. So um, it was finding my mindset started to shift after I started to feel good. So it
mm.
was like I really just had to accept myself, and then the rest came along with it.
Yeah. And you're right. I feel like for me, when I'm in my kind of like cleaning mode, there's certain things that I'm like, that bothers me, and I think we all have things that bother us. Like I am like my kitchen. Like I just feel like if I walk into someone's house and their kitchen isn't clean, I judge. Because I was like, if you have a clean kitchen, I'm gonna get sick here. Like it just and I feel like for me, that's my area that like you'll always come into my house and I'll be a clean kitchen unless I'm actually cooking. So I feel
Yeah.
like, for everyone listening, we all, if you are that doom, and I love the analogy about the doom pile, but if we all have those doom piles everywhere, like you might go in my living room or actually my study and my laundry takes me a couple weeks to fold it before I'm sick of like pulling out socks and underwear. And I finally am like, enough of this, just damn fold it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and one thing that has also helped, so, I still have piles of laundry. However, at this point, they don't feel overwhelming as a home, and I know exactly where that home is of taking the stuff and putting it away. Whereas before, it was a matter of, you know, I've got these piles of laundry and I don't even have a place to put the stuff.
Mm,
So that that piece of it created the anxiousness for me and the frustration and the heaviness. So it was once I knew where to put everything, so kind of like, oh, I accepted the pile because I know it's only going to take me 15 minutes. And when I have that 15 minutes, I'll use it to do the laundry. And I'm at peace with that now. So it's kind of like embracing that your home is a living, breathing thing. Like it is here to support
right.
our lifestyle, not something, it shouldn't be something that we just have to maintain. and peace also.
Yeah. And so I feel like, people listening, I feel like it is that external pressure, especially now in the socials. I remember in the thick of COVID when everyone was home, and there was a person who would judge your background. They would be like, oh, I was watching, some celebrity or some, high end business person, and they're like, they had shit all over their walls, or they only had two books, and you're just like, and so then you kind of like look at your background, you're like, ooh, what do I got? Like, and
Yes.
versus, does my background more reflect me versus the aesthetic that someone is saying you should have?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We get so hung up on other people's expectations, and it's like we're really conditioned and just over time to kind of please everyone else. When in reality, once we please ourselves, it's so much easier to please everyone else, right? Because we're fulfilled.
Right. So if I'm kind of in my kind of clean area phase, my clean era, to quote Taylor Swift, um, and you mentioned you're like finding places for everything, because like you're right, it's really easy for me to like take a bag and just scoop it all into the bag and forget about it.
Yep.
So is the big thing to come up with a, I mean, and I think most people like get overwhelmed because they're like, I need to have a plan for everything, versus
Yeah.
maybe it's like, I have a plan for where I put my pencils, and and let's just start there.
Yes. I had a client who felt very overwhelmed, and the first thing I did was say, okay, let's clean out. And I had an idea of what her home looked like. She'd sent me pictures and things, and she had this small drawer in her kitchen where or I'm sorry, she had all of these like kitchen towels and washcloths out. And I said, okay, what can we do with the towels and washcloths? And she put them all, organized them, and put them in a basket and put it in her cabinet. And she messaged me a month or two later, and she said, everything still feels heavy, but I still have that little basket of my towels and washcloths organized. So that was her reminder, her constant reminder that it was going to be possible to take control of the home. And so when you're starting, if you look at the whole home, it's going to feel super overwhelming. So people, please do not look at the big picture and get overwhelmed. We chunk it down into ways that work for you. So you can chunk it down by category. So maybe you decide today I'm going to do just my closet, or just my socks, just my tops.
Mm,
Um, when we look at the big picture, we get overwhelmed. But when we look at something like by category or the area that it's in, I prefer category if it works for your brain, because it's easy to like look in your closet and say, okay, I have this much room to hang my tops. So
right.
I only want to keep what will fit in this space. So I do like to do category, but if that's not working for you, maybe you start tackling like, okay, I'm going to do just this drawer. And once I get through that, then maybe I move on to the next thing. So really creating the plan that works for you as far as how your brain works, and just making sure you are not worrying about the big picture, because it's going to be
Right.
a process. It took you how many years to get to where you are now? Like I don't want anyone to expect of themselves that they have to have this done in one weekend or,
Right. Right. Right.
2 weeks. Yeah, it's possible. It's absolutely possible, but it's you're not failing if you didn't get it done in a weekend, right?
Yeah. No, and it's the same. Focus primarily on health, and it's the same in health, that most people feel like if you don't have a named diet, then you're destined to fail, and if you don't follow the rules to the T, you're not going to get the results. But just and you're preaching what I always be like, what feels good right now, right? If it only feels good for you to think about, I'm going to have an apple a day, have that damn apple a day, and then when the next thing feels good, let's move on to there. Where I like this approach where, and I'm thinking about myself, it's like, if I just focus in on like the left hand side of my desk and just organize that left hand side of my desk, and maybe I don't move on for another year, it's okay.
Absolutely. I, I think that we have a hard time giving ourselves permission to show up imperfectly.
Yes.
And that hits my heart, honestly, because none of us is perfect. Show up as you are and just keep doing better.
Yeah, no, I absolutely like. I feel like, even though everyone, you'll hear people say like imperfect action is still action, and then but it's more one of those like quotables that you put on a on a wall than what you actually embody and you actually do. Um,
Absolutely.
which leads me into I was looking at your website. One of the things that I thought that was just so awesome, and it just really made me like even more drawn to you than before, was uh the endless stress, that endless stress is normal, that like hustle equals success. And part of the I think part of the clutter is not only like the physical, but here, right? That we're telling ourselves that you're behind, or you should be doing whatever it is that you think you should be doing. And we just get so caught up in the motion and the like
Yeah.
grind that we don't sit back and be like, what the fuck am I doing? Like we don't ever like this take
Yeah.
that beat.
Absolutely. I think it's important to wake up every day and set some sort of intention. Like this doesn't have to be a big process, but when I wake up in the morning, I like to think like, okay, what's my what's my mission for today? And I don't mean it from the hustle and grind perspective. I
Right.
mean it like, how do I want to feel at the end of the day?
Mm,
And if I want to feel well rested, then that means I take it easy that day.
mm,
So I think that we get to start giving ourselves way more permission to show up imperfectly. And I tell all my clients, when you're in this decluttering journey, the simplifying journey, remove the words I should and I
yes,
could from your vocabulary entirely. Because that should word, that's a guilt word. When you say I
totally.
should do this, you're not saying I want, you're saying somebody else made me think that I should do this right
Right,
now.
right, right. No, and I like that. And even usually, like I gotta tell you, like intention for a long time used to make me crazy because I feel like it was just so overused. Um,
Yes.
but
Yes.
uh, and I would just be like, someone would be like, so what's your intention? And I'd be like, oh my god, you make me want to punch you in the face. Um, but I feel like if and what I hear a lot of women, I'm sure you hear this too, is that like stress is just my life, or situations, or my boss, or whatever is your life. And it's like, what if you woke up and you said, you know what? No matter how annoying ABC is, I have to take the high road. And like you just were like, that's your mission for that day. It's just like take the high road, no matter how annoying said person is or situation is. I'm going to do the high road because you can't change annoying people.
Yes. And at the end of the day, you want to feel proud of your actions for the day instead of sitting there at night thinking, oh, I probably could have handled that better.
Right. It's like, or, I used to have a boss I hated, and I would just sit there and be like, oh, great. And I would, the whole time, she could have been praising me, and the whole time I'm like, oh, she's just freaking talking again. And you just were playing the soundtrack of how much you disliked this person in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. I've definitely been in there in that situation. And when you step back and you say, okay, how do I really want to handle this? Like, what's the desired outcome here?
Right.
Then you start to think about it from your perspective versus just like full emotional response to things, right?
Right. And I think, now that, of course, like when you're in the thick of things, it's really hard to kind of like zoom out. And for those of you listening, I totally get it because now, this has been like almost 20 years ago. I look back and I was like, okay, one of the ways I was able to kind of disconnect from her crazy was I started working out. Like that was my like, I was like, you know what? And that I had the like balls to be like, because she was one of those bosses who at like 5 o'clock, like, this needs to be done by tomorrow morning. Like she was that
Oh,
boss. And
uh-huh.
so I had the balls to be like, I started this kickboxing class and I absolutely love it. And on Monday and Wednesdays, I'm leaving at 5:30 to go take the class. I'm like, I'm just gonna make this commitment to myself. And I was very like the whole time I'm like talking to her about it, I was like, she's gonna be like 5:30. And she was like, oh, that sounds interesting. If you stick with it, tell me about it. I'm like, oh hell no, you're not coming with me. And so
Hi, that is my escape. No,
right,
not
I'm
happening.
running away from you. And she like, I was like a good 6 months before she like pulled one of those like must be done. And that was kind of like, I didn't at the time, I didn't have the emotional intelligence to know that that was kind of like my shift of like, I'm gonna make it a good day. Like on Monday and Wednesdays, I don't care what else she throws at me. On Monday and Wednesday, I have something that brings me joy.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think what you said is so important because we allow ourselves because we go through the motions every day, right? We just go through the motions. And so then we kind of allow ourselves, I call it sitting in the ick, like you said when you went in a room and you're like, oh, this bothers me. So one thing that I tell my clients is that when you walk into a room and you have that feeling, oh, this bothers me, first acknowledge it. Like it's just a fleeting thought and we move on. But if when we acknowledge that, then we say, oh, okay, something in here is bothering me. What is it? Then I call them tiny upgrades. And
Mm.
we have the smallest little upgrades that create such good momentum for us. Like one example I had, we had this oh, what are they called? Like a heat vent, the little grate that goes
Oh
in the
yeah,
heat
yeah, yeah,
vent.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? But so the previous homeowners, I don't know what happened to this heat vent, but I mean, it just looked filthy. And every time I walked by it, I was like, oh, I need to do that. But I needed to pull it out, scrub it, and I just didn't have time. And then
Right,
I thought, you know what? I think to replace it, this is going to be like $7. So
right,
I told my husband, I was like, hey, I measured it. I said, hey, pick me up one of these one next time you're at Home Depot. He picked me up one and we replaced it. And now I don't have that icky feeling every time I walk by the vent. Instead, I'm like, oh, I love that new vent. So
right.
these little tiny upgrades are amazing. But what you did, like you were tired of sitting in the ick, right? And you decided that day, I'm gonna do something about it. I get to control my emotions. And so I think that's so powerful to just intentionally do something different to alleviate some of that stress. That's so beautiful.
And I like that term sitting in the ick because you're 1,000% right. I deal with a lot of women and I hear it all the time, like, I have no control. And it's like the control is the ick. And it's like, and then like just like you're like, okay, is it as simple as event, right? Is it simple as going to Home Depot? Is it simple as having a conversation? Is it simple as getting a new job? Like, what is the exit for you versus day after day coming and looking at that event and being like, God damn it.
Because when we sit in the ick, it's like a whole plethora of ick that we're dealing with every day.
Yeah.
Like the moment we wake up, we might see the thing that irritates us, or we get the phone call from the person who irritates us, and like we don't, we feel so overwhelmed by all the little
Yes.
bits of ick that we
Yeah.
just sit through it all. But when you take just a brief moment to address a tiny issue, it really does build that empowerment in you too. Like, okay, I know what this is. I'm just feeling a little off about that thing, and I can address one little issue and it'll snowball into something bigger.
Yeah, no, I absolutely like that because, like you said, you are sitting in the overwhelm. So if I say to myself, okay, if you think about all the things that over the course of the day that you look at, that you're like, it it's like it turns into this huge container of like, ugh. But
Yes.
if I said, okay, you know what? Out of all the things that have like frustrated me today, what's the simplest thing? The great. Okay, Amazon. Here 2 days
That's
I can have that great to me. Maybe your boss, hating your boss is an Amazon thing, but if I start to chip away at the other thing, maybe my boss might not be as irritating by the time I get to work.
yeah. And even like with the boss thing too, it's like, okay, how can I create some sort of solution here? Because I just feel like I'm drowning, and maybe it's, can I work from home for 3 days a week, one day a week, too? Like
Right.
things like that that we just get set in our ways, we go through the motions, and we kind of stop thinking about solutions because we're overwhelmed, we're tired, and we make decisions all day long. And so it's like if we're surviving the hit, sometimes we just let it be. But
Yeah.
I want people to do more than just survive the hit.
Yeah, I feel like, most of the women who listen to my show are over 40. And so we've been in survival mode for a really long time, especially as women, we've been raised to not rock the boat. Like,
Yes. Oh,
stuff it,
yes.
stuff it down, don't be the person who, you know, complains, or the person who, points things out, just kind of sit there and be the good soldier.
Yep. Power through.
Yeah. There's a movie with Cameron Diaz, and she plays the other woman, and the wife confronts her, and she's just like, "Why are you being all emotional?" She's like, "Cry on the inside like a winner." And so, like, every every time, like, I'm like having that like emotional moment, I always am like, you know what? I'm like, cry on the inside like a winner. I'm like, no, I am not gonna cry on the inside like a winner. I am gonna have this emotional moment, and it's gonna feel really good.
Yes. I'm going to let it out and I'm going to be messy and I'm not going to care about it.
Right. And then I was like, in 3 minutes when it's over, it'll feel amazing.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh,
So,
I do love that. Like, but I think we just all get to give ourselves permission to show up authentically.
right. So, when people come to you, is their bulk kind of looking for you to like be an organizer, be a person who helps them kind of like figure out, like, look at this room, is it me going, getting uh containers from the container store? Like, what are people looking for when they come to you?
Usually, the number one thing I hear is I have a lot of clutter, and I'm too overwhelmed to even start.
Mm,
That is the number one thing I hear. And so I always tell people, don't go buy a bunch of containers first, because the goal is that we're reducing a lot of this.
right. So
Um, yeah, you're not going to need a bunch of containers, and also you probably already have some that we can use for other things because you're going to be emptying those out.
right, because you probably stuffed all your shit into the containers and just threw it in the corner.
Yes, exactly. We are gonna address those doom piles and get it out. But um most of the time people tell me they want me to help them organize. That's just the word that they
Right.
understand.
Hmm.
And what they're really needing is to reduce, 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 reduce. Like, get rid of all of this stuff weighing on you. I had a friend share a quote with me the other day. She was reading a book and the author said something along the lines of, we are possessed by our possessions. And I thought, oh, possessed is a very heavy word to me. But I
Yeah,
thought that's so accurate,
it's
because
true.
if you think about coming in your home and you're just like, oh, I have to do the dishes, I have to make the bed, I have to do the laundry, I have to clean this up, or that item is broken, I need to fix that. Like, all of these things are weighing on you. And so it's like all of your things are in control of your time and your energy,
Yeah.
instead of your things supporting the lifestyle that you want to live. So I when I start working with people, we just focus on reducing. And honestly, things naturally organize once you reduce, because you're going to start putting those items in the place where you use them. So
Right.
that's another thing. Like, it's like if you have to walk down to the basement every time you need, this thing that you use daily, or every other day, then that's going to be one of those situations where you're like, Fred, I don't want to walk down to the basement. But so if you're listening to yourself, you'll think, oh, okay, well, I'm irritated by that, so maybe I need to move this to another location. But the organization piece just really works itself out, and it's so beautiful to witness.
Yeah. 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 No, I like the possessions of possessing you, because you're right. I I remember an old house I used to have. Our storage was in the basement, and I don't know how many times that we stopped storing like super stupid things like paper towel and toilet paper, and you're just like, gosh, like, it's cold outside. I don't want to walk outside.
I totally get that.
And you're just like, do I really need that paper towel that bad? I'm like, can I wait till tomorrow morning? So yeah, you're absolutely right. As long as we start to think about what are ways to put our stuff in desired, like the most desired, quick place to go in and grab them. So what made you decide, like, what, this is, I know you said you were always one of those people who like to organize things. Like, what made you start to say, like, yeah, you know what, this is a business for me?
So I actually started watching, I don't know if you're familiar with Marie Kondo.
Oh
She
yeah, yeah,
has like the Finding Joy.
yeah.
Um, I watched her Netflix series, and I just got so inspired to take control of our home. And so I got on Facebook and this was just like, does anybody want to join me? We just had this free group where we were all getting rid of things. And um, I really felt like after I started to do that, I was like, this, it felt so good in my body, like
Mm.
to help people. Like
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
people were like, Brittany, I'm so overwhelmed, it just naturally happened. I was like not intending to do this as a business at all. It was really more so just to take care of my own self. And then I wanted to bring people on the journey with me who it would support. And I also wanted that accountability. So it kind of just like birthed itself when people were like, no, Brittany, I need your help. I need your help.
No, and it's funny, like talking about Marie Kondo, because I feel like she had that moment that everyone was like, "Does this bring me joy?" And everyone was kind
Yeah.
of, but again, a lot of people were shitting on themselves, based on
Yeah.
the rules that she laid out. And I find it interesting that I can't remember when her book came out, um, that now she didn't have children, and now she has children, and she's like, "Girl, I feel you now, like it's the kind of how like the 360 of like all these parents were like, you don't have kids, you don't know what it's like when you like clean a room and your toddler comes in and like it's a tornado, not even 30 minutes later."
That's
So I find it interesting that she's been like, yeah, you're right, I think it was a little extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I first started watching her, so I have two young kids. Right now my kids are 7 and 5, 7 and 5. So I've got the young kids that love to make messes. And I'm with Marie on this one. It is very hard to stay at the level that she was teaching before. And I have so much respect for her to come out and say,
Yes,
like, hey, when I found out she did that, I was just like, and now I love her even more because
yes.
she's owning it, you know, she's not being fake about it. She's giving the world permission to show up with their mess. It's amazing.
Right, because it's like, because we talked about, all these women were thinking I had to follow the rules. And like you said, like young kids do not understand rules. Like they could barely want to put clothes on. How are you going to keep them from like pulling out every toy in a toy box? And
Exactly.
it's funny because it's like you think about like Martha Stewart, right? For I don't even know how long Martha Stewart has been Martha Stewart, but she's still going out to her garden and pulling out freaking eggs and like fresh things out of the garden. And 90% of the people who like follow her, you're like, I am never gonna have a damn chicken, and I do not want to have a garden. And she never ever is like, well, you can go to your local grocer. Like she's always these like, go to your local farmers market, and most of them are like, you're lucky I go to the grocery store.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't remember the last time I stepped foot in a grocery store. Because like it's yeah, I'm with you. I am
Yeah.
with you a hundred
So when
percent.
she came out, like, and I'm sure she was probably like, I don't know what this is gonna be like, and she kind of like dove in, like, you're right, I was wrong, and for all of those that pushback I got, I'm owning it now, and that was just very good because it's all of us get caught up in the if she could do it, why can't I?
Yeah, and I just had so much respect for her not perpetuating this belief that there was something wrong with you if you could not maintain that level of organization that she had originally discussed. It was beautiful.
But I so but are you when you are kind of helping people organize, do do you believe in the kind of like looking at something and being like, does this bring you joy? Like, as people are kind of, because there are people who kind of get very like locked into their stuff.
Yes. And I think it's equal parts like logic and emotion. So
Yeah,
I like taking each item and yeah, asking, does this bring me joy? Does it also serve a purpose? Is it
yeah,
just sitting here? Like when was the last time I used it? So infusing that logic and emotion. And one thing that this is one piece of advice I give people that I always get a lot of excitement around. So I want to share it with your audience. When we have items, the emotional side of it, I encourage people to dig deeper into the emotional side of their attachment with
Mm,
things, because when one example is I had a dress that I absolutely like, I looked fire in it. I just did. I looked amazing in it and I loved it.
right.
The downside was I was wearing it when my grandmother had fallen and broken her neck and I was rushing to the hospital,
Oh,
and I wore it to a funeral, and then I wore it to another funeral. And so over time, every time I went in that closet and saw that dress, it made me feel bad.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so what one person might think like, well, I love that dress. It's beautiful on me. It hits me in all the right spots. But I kept avoiding wearing it because it made me feel
Sad.
sad.
Yeah,
And so I got rid of it because I don't want to feel sad anymore. So it was like the emotional piece of it and the logic piece. I love using in it. Logically, I want to keep this, and emotionally, it just doesn't make sense for me. But then also along the same lines, when you look at something, especially things that have been passed down, I had a bunch of stuff from my grandparents. It was like looking at those items and thinking, okay, does this remind me of like my grandma sitting in her big blue chair and us chit-chatting in the morning? You know, I would have
right.
there towards the end of her life, I would spend the night with her and take care of her in the morning. And that woman had me up at 4 a.m. when I was like 3 months pregnant. And I was like, Mama, you have got to stop
Right.
making them somewhere. I was
You
like,
need
but
you need to keep it down to at least five.
yes, yeah, 4 is too much. But I wanted to remember us sitting in her living room drinking coffee together.
Right,
And some of those items I had purchased for her or other people had purchased for her while she was in the nursing home. And I don't want to think about her in a nursing home. So
right.
it's really like when you look at an item, you might say, like, oh, that was my mammal's, I should keep it.
Yes.
But really it's, oh, that was my mammal's, and that reminds me of when she was laying in that hospital bed and she looked miserable, and I don't ever want to see that thing ever again in my life.
Well, it's funny because I feel like a lot of, especially at our, at our age, there are a lot of our relatives starting to pass away, and so many people are feeling the need that I need to hold on to, pieces of furniture or this or that or what have you, versus what you just said. It's like when you sit in it, one, do you even like it? Let's just go there. One, do you even like it? Two, what memory does it bring up? Does it bring up a
Yes.
good memory, or does it bring up a sad memory? And you know, we have a good friend who, like, his parents were into the collecting this like very vintage Oriental type, furniture, which is such a very distinctive style.
Yeah. Yes.
However, it was from like the 40s and the 50s, like, and some people that brings them joy. Like, that's their jam, that whole like vintage thing. But if it's you have a very modern house, like, it just looks so awkward, and you're just holding on to it because you knew how much your parents treasured it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. We're wired to not want to get rid of those things, right? We
Yeah,
feel like we might not be honoring their memory or something like that. One thing that I've done, started doing in my home is I get creative with how I want to use things. So, like, for sure, when you're looking at these items that have been passed on, always think about quality over quantity. We don't
yeah,
need 75 items of the same, from the
like a
same
half
person.
broken
We need
and a half broken lamp.
exactly. However, we can utilize these things in ways where we get to enjoy them instead of them sitting in a box in
Right,
storage.
exactly.
Um, where you might enjoy it once every year or two when you're trying to hunt down an item
Maybe,
that you can't find.
maybe.
Maybe, maybe. And so, an example, I had my husband's grandmother was, oh my gosh, what is it called? She didn't have dairy. Why can't I
Oh,
think of the word?
lactose intolerant.
Yes, thank you. Lactose intolerant. And so I bought this little teeny tiny casserole dish. And so anytime we had holiday parties, I would always make her separate little casserole. And so after she passed away, I still had that casserole dish that I knew I would not need again.
Right,
So now I have it in my bathroom drawer and I keep my eyeshadow in it.
right.
And so then I also had like a little sugar dish from my grandmother that I keep my makeup brushes in. And so I get ready with my grandparents every day. And
Right.
that feels so good. And so I'm utilizing those things instead of them being wrapped up in bubble wrap in the basement.
Right. Or they're, taking up space in something else that you may or may not ever use again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I like the repurposing of different things. Um, and I like this conversation because I feel like we've kind of hit a lot of things where, like, we broke down. Yeah, there's no should, right? There's no should of how your house should look. However you feel comfortable is however you feel comfortable. Bottom line, end of story. Do not pass go.
Yes.
But if you
Yes.
keep walking in a room and there's that, whatever that thing in the corner or on the floor is, that like always just like kind of like pops up at you, deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not failing if you don't get it all done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the big thing, because it's like some people will look at that grate and then they'll be like, well, but the curtains and then the couch and then it's like, where do you start? Like, is it the
Yeah.
grate? Is it the couch? Is the curtains? And so it's like, for you, it's like, and for me as well, when I'm getting people through nutrition, it's like, what's the simplest thing? Like in 2 days, I could have a new grate. Amazon is going to ring my doorbell. in,
Yes.
in an hour, I could go to the grocery store, or Uber Eats could come to my house and deliver me a healthy meal.
Yes. Yes. Those just like those little small actions, they really start to build up. Just like the it builds up,
Right.
the opposite is true.
Right. But also like the repurposing, because it's like there are sentimental things that you can still think about, but not keep the casserole dish in your kitchen and just be like, hang on, let me move it out of the way so I can get to what I really want to get to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
uh, but yeah, this has been great. And the one thing that I do before we wrap up is that, like, it is, most people say that kind of like the clutter in our life also is a symptom of maybe like some controls that we aren't feeling in our life. And so it's kind of our
Mhm.
way of kind of building a crap fort, if you will.
I love that term, crap fort. I'm gonna have to write that down.
But it's our way of kind of like building our own kind of, protection around us, kind of like our moat, if you will, just so that we kind of feel like we have some sense of control. But it also could be you feel like you don't have control, so therefore everything is just an explosion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that too, because I also think like the house that you go into that might be seemingly perfect, that also may be stressing that person out,
Yeah,
right?
because
So like
yeah,
trying to maintain that, and it may not be stressing them out, but it could be. And that's the thing that we don't, we think, oh my gosh, they've got the perfect house, they've got this all figured out.
right,
But do they really? We don't know.
right. Well, you don't know how, like, why they are keeping this house, or my husband is the neat person, I am not. And so it's like, am I keeping this house neat to please somebody else, or
Yes.
vice versa? And it's like, is there like some kind of, still, that this unseen tension about how your house is kept?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh goodness, like
Absolutely.
that's like totally, like, if we had like a psychiatrist, they would like totally just swim into that pool right there.
That's not dying right in.
Right. I just play one on TV. I am not a psychiatrist in real life.
Love it.
So this has been really, really good. It's exactly what I was looking for. And I hope, Magic Makers, you have been able to take something apart from this. But also feel free to reach out to Brittany, because she's given a couple of different ways for you to help kind of organize yourself, declutter yourself, however you want to describe it. If you are walking into a situation and you're just like, ugh, call Brittany. She can
Yes.
definitely help you out with that. So where can people find you on the socials?
So my favorite place for people to connect with me is my free Facebook group. We have a lot of fun in there. I like to keep it humorous and lighthearted and full permission to show up there imperfectly. So that group is called Brittany Simplifies.
Awesome. And you'll find all of this link in the show notes, friends. And so I always, are you offering any type of like downloadable or anything for them to be able to grab?
Yeah, I do. I actually have two right now. So people can always grab the 100 items to declutter right now from my website, brittanysimplifies.com. Um, that um, that will give you a list of 100 items that you can take a look at. Like that big picture can feel overwhelming, so this can chunk it down into those categories, those types of items. And then also included in that is a list of questions to kind of help guide you. Like if you're feeling stuck, if should I keep this or not, a list of questions will be there to help guide yourself, and that'll get easier and easier over time.
Yeah.
So, and then I last night I just did a Simplify Your Holidays workshop, and I'm getting
Ooh.
that set up. If they want the link for that, I can send that to you, Kim, because I think that I think it will feel good for people to show up a little differently during the holidays and really protect their time and energy.
Yeah, I would love that, and I will get that and make sure I include that because I feel like especially when this comes out, we're all going to be taking down our holiday decorations, and it's a perfect opportunity for you just to. I feel like we put pressure on ourselves regardless of if it's holidays or not, and so it's a great way to kind of like revisit of like how could I go into this next year differently, or how could I go into um any kind of like forced family fun event.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I could go on for days about the holidays. So I'll give you the link to the workshop.
Yeah,
But
I know.
yes.
It's yeah, it's and I just I'm hoping that in my lifetime, the pressure that we put on ourselves during that literal, like, let's just call it that 4 to 6 week period, just hopefully just like dissipates and we just can truly enjoy just it being, hey, I'm get to see my family, or it's that 1 or 2 times a year that you get to see, friends that you don't really see that often.
Yes, that's what it is about. And we
Right.
make it about so many other things that
So
just
many other things.
feel
It's like,
happy.
right, the turkey has to be perfect, and that has to be perfect, and like I'm like uncle.
Yeah, I'm like, let's just go get Chinese food.
Agreed. Agreed. I hate turkey anyway, so it's just that just makes it even better for me. So, Brittany, I ask everyone, what is one thing that makes you feel magical?
So I love coffee, which I know
Ooh,
I'm not special. A lot of people out there love coffee. But my favorite, one of the most magical times is when I get up in the morning and my husband's up and we sit down and we have our coffee together and we just talk. It
oh,
feels
nice.
so magical. I love it. And then I like to do the same with my kids. Obviously, I'm not giving my 7 and 5-year-old coffee,
Yeah,
but I love sitting with them at the table and I drink my warm beverage and we
yeah.
just have the best conversation and it helps me feel so connected to them. It is truly magical.
I like that because it's like, and then you're hoping that, like, let's fast forward 20 years from now and they will, like, that'll be like an experience of like, oh, you know what? My mom and I, we would sit and have, drink whatever it is that they drink. And hopefully that could become the tradition that they might start with their families, or just something that they just like, that was a good time with my mom.
Yes. I'm all about experiences, especially given what I do, but
Yeah.
I really try to make just small moments special for the kids relationship wise between them and myself and those small moments I feel like are the really big things.
Yeah, and it's funny how like, as you kind of like flash back in your childhood of like what you remember, and it's always like these random days. There's not these like days where your parents like contorted themselves to make it a perfect day. It's just some random Tuesday at home.
Absolutely. I remember vividly in preschool one day, I just cried for what felt like no reason. The teacher was trying to figure out what was wrong. And I honestly couldn't think of anything. And I just said, I really miss my papa. And so my dad picked me up from preschool that day and took me to see my papa. And that moment right there was like, I just felt so seen and heard. And I don't, necessarily remember all the effort they put in to make my Christmas Day special or
Right,
something. I
exactly.
remember that.
Right. Meanwhile, your
Yeah.
parents would be like, "Oh, I remember the night we stayed up all night and put out to get that damn bike," and you're like, "I remember when you picked me up from school and took me to see Grandpa." Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So this has been such a great conversation, Brittany. And anyone who is like looking to get cluttered, like you are in such great hands here because she's not that person who's going to come in and like blow up your life. She's going to work with you where you are and kind of baby step you into the pool of organization. So thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate you, Kim. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Magic Maker. So do me a favor, if this resonates with you, do me a favor, make sure you leave a review. It really is really helpful for me. And if there's any one takeaway that you got from the show, screenshot it and make sure you share it on the social so that more people can hear about the show and hear about all the amazing ways that you can declutter your life as well.